a lot of what we got to do is listen. A lot of folks just want somebody to listen to them and hear their side of the story. And when they do give their side of the story, even when they're wrong, they understand the actions we're going to take when we listen to both and say, hey, man, this is what we got from both sides, and this is the decision I have to make. A lot of law enforcement is common sense and trying to relate to people and explain to them what's going on, in common terms.
The Local Insider Show is brought to you in part by My Patriot Supply. You don't need to live in the heart of a hurricane zone or along an active fault line to be serious about emergency preparedness. If we've learned anything from both historical and recent events, crises can come in all shapes and sizes, and they can come at any time, even overnight. Whether you're experiencing the effects of long-term illness, an accident, job loss, or even widespread threats like terrorist attacks, economic collapse, or an outbreak of disease, you can tackle what's next in confidence with My Patriot Supply storable foods. No matter what your emergency may look like, you won't have to worry about where you're getting your next meal. And as far as your survival is concerned, there's nothing more important than that. Already our foods and packaging undergo regular, rigorous testing to ensure they exceed industry standards for safety, quality, and shelf life. Ready Hour also conducts regular analytical, microbial, and oxygen level inspections, as well as sensory testing of raw materials and finished goods in a food testing lab. Don't delay, prepare today. When an emergency is on the way, My Patriot Supply receives a rush of orders that slows their ability to ship as quickly as usual from their warehouses across the country. Go to localinsidershow.com/emergency food to order your 2-week or 4-week supply of storable food.
My next guest grew up in Jacksonville, Arkansas, and graduated from North Pulaski High School. He attained a bachelor's degree in English at Lyon College and earned his Doctor of Jurisprudence from UALR's William H. Bowen School of Law. After practicing law for some time, he was introduced to law enforcement, taking a reserve deputy position. He has worked at the Logan County, Arkansas Sheriff's Department since 2008 and was elected sheriff in 2018, where he currently serves. He's a husband to Heidi, a father of 5 children, a lawyer, a drummer, and the current sheriff of Logan County. Please welcome Jason Massey.
Welcome to the Local Insider Podcast, a show about everyday people who make a big difference.
Sheriff Jason Massey, thank you for coming on the show.
It is a very pleasure to be here.
Like I was saying before the show, this is kind of a milestone for me and in the podcast. Whenever I first had the concept for this podcast to highlight the local heroes and the people, the leaders, civic leaders, and community leaders, I thought of a show where the county sheriff could come on and kind of talk about the good things going on in the county. But here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great thing when you take history, and what you're doing is you're making history. You're taking oral interviews and putting them on record that's in a format that generations can listen to, which is something we don't have from 50, 100, 200 years ago. So it's very good for you to do that.
I'm happy to. It's like I said, it's a humbling experience, and I'm just thankful for the opportunity to do this. So for the folks at home that don't know a lot about you, what's your story? Where did you grow up?
Well, my father was in the Air Force. He spent 24 years in the Air Force pretty much as a flight engineer on C-130s. So, my young life, I was born on an Air Force base, Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi, Biloxi, Mississippi. My dad was from Selma, Alabama, and grew up during the turbulent times back then, with my mom being from Illinois. And so, as a young kid, we moved. We went to Simbach Air Force Base in Germany. We were there for 3 years. And then one of my dad's friends had gotten stationed in Little Rock Air Force Base. And so he had asked my dad, hey, come down here. And so that's how we came to Arkansas, was through Little Rock Air Force Base. And we ended up living outside the base. And I grew up in Jacksonville, pretty much North Pulaski, kind of an incorporated area up there. And that's, I spent most of my life there in Jacksonville. Graduated from a high school called North Pulaski, which does not exist anymore. It's kind of sad. I was there we did a final tour on Saturday to go through the building. But when North Pulaski broke off as a school district, they built one big high school and consolidated mine. So it's kind of sad to see that history go. But yeah, that's where I grew up at, is in Jacksonville.
So would that be the school now that is Pulaski Academy? Is that? Well,
no, it's Jacksonville High School.
Oh, okay.
At that time, there was Jacksonville High School, which pretty much had the city, and the North Pulaski High School had the Northern Pulaski County, and they were part of the Pulaski County Special School District, which was a huge school district. And they got smart and broke off and formed their own. And so with a lot of money, they consolidated and built new schools. So, I grew up in a school district that was really big and all that. I think there was 300 people in my graduating class. And
wow.
And just as a side note, that's one of the things that attracted me here to move rural, is because when you're here and you see how much the school district impacts the community, whether it's in Boonville, Paris, Magazine, County Line, Scranton, it is something different than what I grew up with. Where we were a large school out in the county, there was really no centralized city. And so for my kids, to be a part of a rural school district, to me, it's a lot better experience for them, to be involved in something that's a community education all at the same time, instead of having a school here and then, being part of something bigger. So
you said you grew up in the Air Force and you traveled a lot. Are the lessons that you learned, are they tools that you can use for like your job now, or?
Yes. One of the things you learn as a military kid is you just learn to make friends, and you learn that some things are permanent, some things aren't. So, when you move, and you see this across a lot of professions. I mean, your parent might be a pastor or something like that you move around a lot. So you just learn to meet people, and all these people have different experiences that you can talk to them about. And I've met people all across racial, religious, all that kind of stuff, because we're all, when you're in the Air Force Base, that's one thing I think that was about being exciting about being an Air Force or an Armed Forces kid, is when you go to the base, and we lived on base for a while, there are a lot of young adults, young couples who also, so there were kids everywhere. I mean, there were kids everywhere. So there was always a lot of stuff to do, a lot of stuff to play and things like that. So it was a lot of fun, but it's also just learning that all these people have so many different backgrounds, so many different states and stuff that we had to learn to deal with. And, caring for that here, it's the same thing with this job here. We as being a sheriff, and before that I've been a deputy, you meet a lot of people, and you have to relate to them pretty quick, because most people, when they have a problem, they want somebody to hear it. And so when we show up, law enforcement, whether it's police or a deputy, a lot of what we got to do is listen. A lot of folks just want somebody to listen to them and hear their side of the story. And when they do give their side of the story, even when they're wrong, they understand the actions we're going to take when we listen to both and say, hey, man, this is what we got from both sides, and this is the decision I have to make. A lot of law enforcement is common sense and trying to relate to people and explain to them what's going on, in common terms.
Right. That's interesting. I'm friends with a former police officer from Yale County, and he was telling me a story about a guy that always gave the department trouble, and he would always fight every officer that would show up. He would fight them. The only one that he wouldn't fight was this guy, and it was because he would listen to him. And it was to the point that whenever they got a call for that address, they would radio for a van, and he would go over there, and he would just hand the guy the cuffs, and the guy would put the cuffs on himself, and he'd say, like, what's going on? And he would talk to him. So I guess it was the guy's therapy session for the month or whatever, but he just needed, like you said, he needed somebody to hear him.
And it's getting more important these days with all the isolation and the social isolation. People, I think, especially as broadband gets bigger and gets into the rural areas, that people are going to be at home more. They're able to order stuff to get sent to home, not going to the store. They're able to get on the internet and say things, but a lot of things you say have a consequence because you're just going to, you're going to put something on Facebook and so when we get called, there's going to, some folks aren't going to have much personal contact, and police might be that first personal contact they had in a long time. So that's why we always talk with especially our new guys and say, hey, we got to let these, now within reason, but we got to let these guys talk, find out what's going on, what their point of view is, and then try to come with that. So it's hopefully it won't be a lost art, but it seems like sometimes it is getting there when it comes to relating to other people.
Sure. So, that kind of brings me to one of the questions I had was, what is your leadership type?
Well, I would say mine is more, I believe, I would say a coaching type style and a strategic style. We try to look at where trends are going and what's going on. My thing is, as the sheriff, my number one job is, when it comes to my employees, is to train them and equip them for the situations that's going to happen. I can't be out there all the time. And I go by what the state law says about sheriffs, and it's more, and it goes even back to what's called common law, is, a deputy is the personal representative of the sheriff. And so when they're out there, what they're doing, it represents me, and then it also represents law enforcement. And so we look at the trends, we look at what's going on, we find out who's doing what. We want to equip, we want to train, and then we want to provide the necessary information. And that's one of the big things I've worked on is, getting with the Boonville Police Department, getting with the Parish Police Department, getting with, Game and Fish, the Drug Task Force, which is a 4-county task force out of Danville, getting with state police, all these folks, and trying to coordinate information, share information, so we know what to look for and when to look for it. And we've done a really good job with that, in that cooperation. But a lot of time is just sharing and trying to get over egos. Egos gets in the way of everything, but it's just something that, that's there. I think it's a big test that God gave us is to get along. And it's hard to do that sometimes because, we're competing with each other for not just, bragging rights on this or that, but we're competing for employees and everything else. But in Logan County, we have really, we get along probably better than most agencies do between county and city, I know, around here.
At one time, I knew quite a few officers in the department, and I've never heard anything. Since you've become sheriff, I've never heard not one. It seems like it's a team. It seems like, it's not just a job for them. Everyone I've spoken to has nothing but great things to say. Oh, so what brought you to Logan County?
Well, I guess jobs are really what brought me here. After high school, I went to college. I went to Lyon College up in Batesville, which is a liberal arts college. It's kind of conservative, but it's a nice little school. I got a Bachelor of Arts in English, which, that sometimes to my employees under me, that can be a detriment sometimes, because I do love to review reports, but I always tell them I don't hold them up to that standard. But we do work on that a lot. After I graduated, I went to law school in Little Rock. That's where I met my wife at. And her parents lived at that time, lived in Russellville. And so I wanted out of Little Rock. I grew up my whole life there at that point, and I wanted out. I wanted to go to a smaller place. And it just ended up that there was a job in Logan County. It was actually a public defender, which is kind of the opposite of law enforcement. But it was a full-time public defender job, and I took it. And, I represented people in we call it district court, but it's municipal court, city court, traffic court, we don't call it, juvenile court, felony circuit court. I did it all, and I just really, really loved being here. My first jury trial I've ever tried was in this courthouse right down the road from where we're at. I got to know the law enforcement. Mark Lindbergh was the sheriff at that time. I got to know him pretty well, a lot of his deputies. I got to know the police, and it's just, man, Logan County was a place that I wanted my kids to be raised at. At that time, then my wife got a job in Little Rock. So I was here for a while. We moved back to Little Rock. She was a Little Rock city attorney and did like a district court, traffic court type prosecutions. And I worked at some different law firms. I did personal injury, which was I don't ever want to do that again. Get someone in there, and this box fell on my arm, and I was at Walmart, and I was very unhappy. And I've always had an interest in law enforcement. And at that time, I got on as reserve deputy at Saline County. which we live down there in the eastern end. That's Benton and Bryan, if you've heard of those two communities. That's where Saline County is. Very great community. I mean, it was a great county. And I got on as a reserve deputy, and then I started working for Mike Rainwater. I think you've probably seen his commercials, Rainwater, Section Hole. But he had a small part of his law firm back then that defended county governments. He had a contract with counties where, like, they got sued for civil rights violations or stuff like that, you know, stuff in the jail, medical, all that kind of stuff in the jail. And that's what I did. So I got to know sheriffs all across the state. I mean, we represented like 37. That was half. And I was traveling around all different counties. I got to know sheriffs, deputies, jails. You know, I did jail lawsuits, all this kind of stuff. And I thought, man, it was just something different. I just always liked the office of the sheriff. This is something that goes back to the dawn of America, you know, and it represents that kind of like just the old school thought. And that sheriff at that time of the county I lived in, Saline County, he knew I was an attorney. And one day he's like, look, I need someone up in the captain level that's got your knowledge and your experience. Because, man, I was working as a reserve deputy every weekend. My wife was getting tired of it. And she's like, and when he offered me that position, she goes, that's great. You can get both. And that way, you know, you could be almost on the weekends. And so I took it, and I really enjoyed I was administrative captain at a bigger sheriff's office. At that time, we had, you know, 43 deputies and like 40-something. We had a 180-bed jail. But it was still, we wanted to come back here. You know, being here was still on my mind because I liked it down there. It was big. It was just a big area. And after a couple of years, you know, we had a couple of kids, and man, we didn't want our kids going to school down there. And so, Logan County just happened to have a deputy position open. Steve Smith was the sheriff, and I'd met him some back when he was at Paris Police Department. And, you know, and they offered me a job, and I came here and I worked as a patrol deputy. And then I worked up to an investigator. I was an investigator here for 6 years. Worked under Ray Jake, who had, you know, was a former sheriff back in the 90s, had come back and was working for Steve, and he was our CID, Criminal Investigation Division supervisor. And I worked under him, and that's just, and then from then on, it's where I end up now. But I've been here for a long time, and I just can't, you know, sometimes people talk about, I know during an election, I've had folks say, you know, this candidate, he's from here. I grew up here all my life, and you should elect me because I grew up here all my life. And, you know, and I got up there one time, and I looked at the crowd, and I said, look, I'm not from here. I didn't grow up here all my life. But I chose to raise 5 kids here. My wife and I chose. I don't want to say me because it's always a decision with both of us. We chose to come here and raise our kids here. Our best asset to come to this county, because we feel like this is the county that I don't want to say everyone needs to come to, but because we don't need to get too big. But man, it's a beautiful county. It's full of a lot of good people. And that's why we came here, was because of that. And so I'm very proud to say I'm from Logan County. And you know, I see myself as an ambassador from Logan County. My wife, she is a labor mediator for the Department of Labor. So she does mediation cases with like large corporations. And they had a conference one time, you know, and they wanted me to come speak about active shooters, you know, at a you know, warehouses and stuff. And of course, when I went there, and in my presentation, you know, I put Mount Magazine. I had a picture of the lodge. You know, I had a picture of the, you know, the different cities in there. Cause, you know, I just feel like we need to push where we live at. Cause this is a wonderful place to live.
If we ended the show right there, it would be a hit. You know, there's a common thread that is through all of the guests I have on. And there's something special about this place. There's something special about the people. And your story highlights that. I guess one of my goals is to try to find what that is. I know it's the people, but it's the place too. There's something about the beauty of the place. Aside from that, being like you said, when you're running for sheriff, it seems like everything that has happened in your life set you up to be the perfect candidate for a sheriff. You have the law background, which is very crucial, and one of the things that I tried to point out to people during the election was how important the sheriff is in a community, because, you know, they may think, you know, what does it matter? They have to follow. I'm like, well, the sheriff is the highest elected official in your land. Like, going back to common law, like, as far as common law is concerned, I don't know how this would play out if it actually happened. But if the president of the United States came to the state of or the county of Logan County and started ordering people around, if for whatever reason, hypothetical, it was a tyrannical whatever, the sheriff is your protection, because the way our system of government set up is that the power is closest to the people, and the sheriff is that. Would you agree with that?
I would. You see a lot of people quote the Constitution, and a lot of people don't know what they're talking about, but I've read the thing many times. And, the Constitution is a limiting document. That's one thing people don't understand. It's a document made to limit the government to do stuff.
Right.
And that's something very important that I tell our deputies and the police officers we do with. Our job is to protect the Constitution. There are times I've pulled somebody over and I say, "Can I search your car?" And they say, "No." I know something's in there, but I can't search it. That's their right. Mm-hmm. I don't have anything, to do that. And a lot of times that's hard for us to think about, or when we, there's a lot of people that get in law enforcement and they feel like they are the law, and they feel like that when someone doesn't obey, they take it personal. Mm-hmm. But the problem is this country was founded on disagreement. I mean, that's what we were founded on. That's why do we have an amendment in the Bill of Rights that says you can't quarter soldiers in houses? Because there was a British government that they can look at your house, they could put 10 soldiers, let them live in your bed, and there wasn't a darn thing you can do about it.
Right.
They were arresting people, not telling them what their charges were, hold them in there with no bail, and the people were mad about that. And that's why our Constitution and the Bill of Rights are there, because it was citizens who were mad about a government telling them what to do without providing safeguards. And that's just something in law enforcement we have to remember. And I believe that at the county level or at the rural level that, we are more in tune with that. I mean, we've got a lot of folks here. You got a guy running around, he's got a gun rack and a shotgun hanging in his back window. You're not going to think something like that than if you're in Minneapolis or, San Francisco or Boston or someone like that in the city. It's just a different feeling. And I just think that in this rural areas that we actually respect people's individual rights more than these big city politicians, whatever letter they've got after their name. I just think that we have a better understanding of what it is to be a free person than someone who lives in these other areas that are more tightly controlled.
Right. And you don't know how wonderful it is to hear my sheriff say the things that you just said, because with all the back and forth online where, our country is so divided, and you have those bad apples coming from those places that you're talking about where they don't uphold their oath. The Constitution is a document that limits government. It's not something that grants us anything. Those things are granted from our Creator. It is a document that limits the power of government. And, just like the Constitution says, those specific powers not vested to the government are reserved for the people. So that's why I say the most important election in your land is your sheriff, because he's the highest elected executive office in the land. And I couldn't be more happy that you're in Logan County now.
Yeah, well, one of the nice things I can say about that is, we have a sheriff's office, or we have a sheriff's association called the Arkansas Sheriff Association. All 75 of us belong to it. And I'm telling you, and I like to go to conferences and I like to talk with our fellow sheriffs. Most of the sheriffs we have in the state are the same as me. Mm-hmm. And these are some there are some that have different letters after their names, but when it gets down to it, they believe in the local level. And we have an email, we have text, we keep each other informed about things that are going on. Mm-hmm. And whether it's the federal government, things like that. So we're observing, we're watching. We want to protect people's rights big time, especially against federal encroachment, if that's where it gets to. Mm-hmm. And so, I hope to God none of this ever happens. I hope we don't ever get there.
Right.
But there's always a possibility, that it can happen. Our world right now is very turbulent. Right. I'm a guy who reads the Democrat Gazette every day. I've got it on my iPad, and I read it every day because I like to know what's going on in the world, because it affects us. And we see that right now with the way our economy is and inflation and all that kind of stuff. What happens around comes here. So we just have to be vigilant about it. Mm-hmm. We have to watch it. We have to make sure our local politicians are aware of what we think. We need to be talking with our state representatives or state senators. I mean, we had Sarah Huckabee Sanders came right through here a couple of days ago, and you got to be talking to these people.
Right.
And it's important, and I'm not saying me as a sheriff, I'm talking about citizens. It's important for us to let our politicians know where we stand on issues, because that empowers them to go down there and say, hey, I've got a lot of people that are pushing me on this issue, so it's important to our people.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people, they say write your congressman. When you have an issue, people say, well, write your congressman or congresswoman or your senator or state senator, and people say, well, it's not going to matter, and it's not going to matter if you don't, because I think that's kind of the issue that we're at, is the apathy has caused this, where you have career politicians that haven't had to hear the voice of their constituents, and you see things that happen are happening with some of the unpopular politicians who have gone out on the trail or whatever, and you can see the just shock in their face when they have people shouting at them, and because for all they know, everybody loves them because they're not hearing the voice of their constituents. So yeah, I would echo that same sentiment that we should definitely let our elected officials know where we stand and what we need from them, and how things are back here in the county or in the city or wherever you live.
Yeah, they listen. I know our state representatives, our state senators listen, and they understand when they're getting pressure from home. And I've talked to them about issues, and they have said, yeah, I've gotten phone calls on that, and believe me, that stuff matters to them. They want to know, what issues are hot, so they can go down there and look and say, look, I'm getting a lot of pressure at home, and this is an issue that's forefront. So they do listen. Yeah. And you've got to inform. I listen. When people call and tell me things, because you just don't know all the time. Like you said, in American society, and I'm sure it's all across where humanity is, a lot of times the minority is vocal, and sometimes they are more vocal than what's called the silent majority. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's good. Just like you said, you need to express yourself, because the silent majority's got to talk sometimes.
Right.
It's so easy right now. And I'm telling you, elected officials, sometimes it's very hard because of the pressure that we get by seeing something on Facebook or on, Instagram or some social media that's just from one person. And you got to remind yourself that's just one person, but it's out there, and we've got to listen. It's just so complex. Everything is complex.
It is. Everything's so complicated now.
Yeah.
I've had both of the candidates that are running against the incumbent. I invited Jerry on. He said he was going to come on, but he never called me back. But and I asked them the question, and because like you said, I keep my ear to the ground, and I see. I'm a student of history, I like to think, and I hope, and I don't think that this would ever happen, but in the case that there was some kind of tyrannical executive move made by somebody on the federal level, and they came in and tried to start rounding people's weapons up or whatever, I asked the candidates, what would you do? And I said, I know that's probably would be more on the sheriff's job, or, in Arkansas it's kind of weird because we have a quorum court and JPs and all that, but I still go back to, it would probably be the sheriff that would have to stand up.
Yeah, but I think the line where you're going to, though, it wouldn't be just me, though, because I would be talking to our county judge. I would be talking to our mayors. I would be talking to our police chiefs for us to get on the same level, because if it's got to be united on something like that. Right. But I'm telling you, if something like that happened in Arkansas, and see, I know a lot of federal agents too, because we work with the feds a lot. And I'm telling you, they don't want to be in that picture either. Right. That's one thing people understand. They think, oh yeah, the FBI, whoever. Those ones that are around here, they don't want to be involved if the government does. There'd be a lot of resignations going on across this country. But yeah, it's important for us to be on the same page on this stuff.
Sure.
Because, the people, the mayor is, I was at the mayor debate, and the reason why I went, I don't live in Boonville, but the reason why it's very important who are leaders. A mayor is the representation of this city. And so when you go talk to this person, it's very important for to know what each person, what they believe and what they're going to do when the proverbial stuff hits the fan, because it's going to happen. I think that you think of all these school boards 4 or 5 years ago that were doing, the biggest thing they were doing is, maybe doing a contract for a teacher or a superintendent stuff. But then COVID happened and things got serious hard because threats started coming out. You're going to wear a mask. You're not going to wear a mask. And so I think that the representation, the representative bodies, whether school boards, city councils, court, that kind of stuff has changed because you start seeing that the issues that are popping up are they give a lot of emotion. I know the mask debate, the shots, all that was a very, very, very high octane type issue.
Very much.
And so that's why it is important to have to understand who you have as your elected official, because when things do hit the fan, where are they going to be at on that?
So what is your opinion on, at the federal level, you have the Department of Justice targeting these parents that are going to these school board meetings? And
I don't think the Department of Justice have anything to do with that.
I agree.
I think that, and the Department of Justice, and I want to say that the U.S. Department of Justice, they have their role in things. Absolutely. But when it comes down to local level, that's a local level issue. That's a school board issue. That's a police chief that goes to the mayor issue. That's a city council issue. And it's a sheriff issue because I'm not appointed, so it's the people. But no, I think the feds need to, the problem that makes me angry about that is there are a lot of things that are going on, crimes that are going out of this country. I mean, people get scammed and stuff like that. We can't do anything about that. To me, the feds need to be worrying about stuff like that,
right,
that they can handle under their umbrella and the resources, and not be focusing on the little stuff that we can handle in here. If you don't like how we're handling it, vote the people out and put other people in.
Right.
But I've read about them getting involved. Of course, they come in on the umbrella saying it's like a 14th Amendment, civil rights issue, and so we got to. And no, it's a people issue.
Right.
And at the local level, it's local people.
Right.
And so we need to hand that. But I know where you're coming from on that. The federal government has always had a problem with going beyond what they're supposed to do. The Commerce Clause, which is this clause that's supposed to regulate commerce between states, they use that all the time to just grasp and control money. They hand out a lot of money, which really is our money. It's taxpayer money. It comes from us. But they use that as another way of directing states to do what they want to do. And that's not what they're for.
Right.
There is not enough assets out there to handle all the crime and the stuff that's going on. Let us handle our stuff. Let them go handle the nationwide, the international, that type of stuff.
Just yesterday, I was listening to a podcast, and one of the guests was talking about how China is making fentanyl, and they're making it in these pastel colors, and they're sending it to the Sinaloa cartel, who in turn is bringing it across the southern border. And you have all these people that are, ODing on this stuff. He said that he would call it a terrorist attack, is what his friend, who was a former FBI agent, said that it was. No, former DEA agent. He said it's an attack, and you can go down the conspiracy trail. But why I bring this up is I saw another video where there was a lady who's a nurse. She's an ER nurse, and she was obviously distraught and crying because her daughter had been given. And I don't want to cause alarm. I don't want to, frighten people. But her daughter was given what she thought was like a sweet tart or a Smartie or something in school. And it was laced with enough fentanyl that she didn't make it because they didn't have Narcan at the school. So I immediately, whenever I got to work, I was like, Wayne, because he's on the school board magazine. I was like, watch this video. I was like, do you guys have Narcan? He's like, no, but we will.
I will tell you this: there's several issues there, and I'll try to hit them across the board. But Magazine is definitely working on. You know, we signed a contract with the city of Magazine. The sheriff's office did, so we kind of took over law enforcement there, and you know, we have a full-time law enforcement officer known as the chief. Then we have a part-time officer. Then we have another part-time officer that was added, who's a school resource officer. All of our folks have the Narcan that helps with, but it's not just fentanyl. It's an opioid that overdose is what Narcan does. And we have it when it comes to the issue of fentanyl. We're seeing it in our county now. We haven't had any reports of it in Canada or anything like that, but it is permeating all society. And so I know Magazine itself and now their nurses are about to go through some training. They're working on some training for them. I know Brett Chappell, who's the police chief there, we were talking about this a couple weeks ago. We're going to get some training, get Narcan in the schools there. And I know in all the officers across Logan County have Narcan. And so, you know, that's an issue that we were seeing here. But, you know, to me, it goes back to our borders. Right. And we're not a border state, thankfully. But man, there's a war going on down there that is being ignored by a lot of politicians. There's absolutely no doubt about it. When I came here, we were still in the meth lab part where we were finding meth labs. We busted a meth lab up in the northern part of the county, right in the middle of it. I mean, they were cooking meth. We got everybody arrested there. We're not seeing meth labs anymore. And the reason why is they're making it down there in Mexico and other places, and it's really, really pure and it's cheaper. So why do you want some dirty meth lab, you know, on some back road in Logan County, when you can get this pure stuff coming over the border that's cheaper and a lot more effective than what they make here? So we don't see hardly meth labs. There's some shake and bakes, you know, where they make these little small amount. It's kind of dirty-ish type meth. But the main meth we're seeing come right across that border. You know, really? We were involved in a huge bust several years ago. We got a guy up in the northern part of the county who was actually delivering for a cartel. And we worked with the federal government on that. And he got 22 years in the federal pen, which is great because the federal pen has no parole. They don't do an emergency powers that kick everybody out for 6 months. But that is an indictment to tell you whether it's fentanyl, whether it's meth, or whatever. It comes across that border like nothing. I mean, the Border Patrol do what they can down there. But we have got to get this border, especially our southern border, locked down and let the people in this country that need to be here, that can contribute to here, instead of all this is coming across on there, because drugs are pouring down there. China, heck, a lot of the stuff you can get stuff in the mail. I mean, they'll mail it to you, you know, and you think how many packages are going through. They can't check every package. So there's a lot of things that we need to focus on that are outside of Arkansas. I really do think that the border is a huge national, and it's a terrorism issue. There's no doubt about it. It's a health issue. It's an economic issue. It's such a big issue. I don't know why they don't get that solved. Right. Lock it down, and then start figuring out who we need to let in, who not.
I agree, and I firmly believe that it's totally political, because if it weren't, they wouldn't give such high priority. Well, they're talking off both sides of their mouths. They're saying, okay, during the height of COVID, we've got to lock everybody down, but there was no particular importance in locking down the border. They weren't even testing the people that were coming across. So it was like, open up the border, put everybody in their house. So it was political. I mean, you can judge them by their fruits. It was political. One other thing I wanted to touch on, that something you said made me think of it. You're talking about how you got the guy, he's like 20-something years in federal pen. What's going on in like these states that their district attorneys are supposedly bought out or something like that up north, where I think it's Illinois. January 1 is going to be, people are calling it the purge, where I guess they're saying like arson and theft, armed robbery, all these things are going to be non-detainable offenses. Have you heard anything to that?
Yeah, I've heard some on that. I know that some states are going to like their own non-bail state, and I think, you know, you look at what's going on in California, and it's some major media has reported it, some is kind of glossed over. You know, they're having stores that are getting ransacked because nothing's going on. You know, they're getting buildings that are, you know, broken into, and things are happening, people aren't doing their job. But, you know, in Arkansas, we don't have that type of problem. But what we do have is, you know, it's just that age-old issue of, Do you want to incarcerate somebody, or do you want to rehabilitate them, or however it goes?
Right. That's an issue that came up in the debate that I kept hearing from the mayoral candidates is, well, we can lock them up, but they'll be out. That's kind of what brought me to that comparison to the I don't know, whoever does the prosecuting up there. They say they're bought out by George Soros or whatever. Yeah. You know, you hear all that, but what can we do here to kind of hedge against something like that?
This is a good way, a good time for me to describe how things normally work. In Arkansas, at the local level, when someone is convicted of a felony and they are convicted and they get prison time, when that judgment is signed, that person becomes an ADC, Arkansas Department of Corrections, becomes an ADC inmate. And so they wait in the county jail, unless they can make an appeals bond, but that's rare. They sit in the county jail until a bed opens up in one of the state prisons. So where we're at in Arkansas is we have a huge number of what we call ADC inmates. They're just been convicted, and they're sitting in county jails all across the state waiting for that bedtime. Mm. And, you know, in Logan County, we got a 100-bed jail, but it's not really a 100-bed jail. The jail has 100 beds, but like I think 7 of them are for booking, you know, when they break temporarily. In the main pod, 67 are male, and I think it's 37. Yeah, 37, and there's 6 beds in booking. But anyways, 37 are female. So they start at one time I had 30 people sitting in our jail waiting to go to the Arkansas Department of Corrections.
So do they pay you rent for that?
They do. They give us $40 a day. But what the problem it gets is the space that they're sitting there that we could be putting someone else in there. Mm-hmm. And so that's been a big issue. It used to be less, like $32 a day. The legislator did raise it. The sheriffs really pushed that. The Arkansas Sheriff Associations, they got up to 40. So the big issue that like Miss Sanders, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and then our new Attorney General who's coming up, Tim Griffin, they're really pushing about bed space. I can look at you in the eyes right now and tell you, when there are certain people incarcerated, crime is lower in Logan County. It's the way, I'm telling you, it's the way it is. There are certain thieves that we have to deal with all the time. When they're in prison, our crime rate is down. So what happens is the Arkansas Department of Corrections gets overloaded.
So they're like kingpins or something?
Well, they just do it.
Oh.
No amount of time is going to, when they get out, that's what they do. And there's no amount of rehabilitation going to work. And so what I'm saying is the Department of Corrections does what's called an Emergency Powers Act. It's something that, and that allows them to release a certain number of inmates. And then they release those, they come back, and then we get to put the other ones in there. But it's a revolving door. And all these people, we don't need to build more. Yes, we do need to build more prisons. Another thing that goes with that is, if you're in a jury trial and you're a jury, or even if you're doing a bench trial, which is when a judge makes a decision, when you sentence someone, you really don't know how much time they're going to serve. You can say, man, we just gave this guy 30 years in prison. Man, he's going to go away. That's not how it works. There's good time. There's a few, it depends how many times you've been to prison where you serve 1/3, 1/4. You know, there's all this formula. Mm-hmm. People don't ever serve really what they were sentenced to. And then you have the Emergency Powers Act that's totally separate from that. They can not take someone out of prison. Now they try not to do, you know, the violent and those folks.
Capital murder and stuff like that.
But these still are like the thieves and the drugs and all that kind of stuff not get put out every time. And so that really hinders us too. We try to do what we can. I mean, you know, in the jail, you know, I've got when I come in and we open this big jail, you know, we've done programs. We've got a GED program. That's something that I talk with the local career education center. We got a GED in there. We've got folks that come up and volunteer and do like Celebrate Recovery and different programs. We have a peer support specialist. She's a lady who years ago was addicted to drugs, got over her addiction, and then joined one of these counseling places and got accredited as a counselor and can go back and talk to people. We've got 2 of those in our jail. We got another lady who gets prepared them reentry programs, tries to get them prepared for getting back out. So we've got a lot of programs under jail, and so we're trying to do what we can. We would love to see people rehabilitated.
Right.
And there are people that can, but I'm telling you, drugs is a very powerful addiction.
Yeah. Very
powerful. And the limited time they have in our county jail is really not enough in many cases to do that. The good thing is we get folks connected in the jail. That's one of our reentry program lady and our peer support specialists. They'll help them out of jail too. So they'll get them hooked up when they get out of jail on NA or AA classes, things like that. So we're trying, but it's just an issue that is so hard to deal with.
And you hear you hear all the time, well, the person has to be ready to be better.
Yes.
And the more I learn, the more I realize that it really comes down to a personal journey and a brain issue with these people. If you can ever direct them into a spark to where they can, instead of relying on some people say a crutch or a substance for that dopamine hit, if you can give them a little glimmer of hope to where they align their life to where they're in pursuit of a goal, then they can have what dopamine was set up for in our bodies. Dopamine's not for the celebration, because you've won elections. The celebration is really not what it's about. It's the pursuit. It's the everyday goals. That's what it's meant to keep us going, not like a big party, So, like I said, from what I'm reading, what I've understand, if you can ever point them so they can align their lives in a direction to where they have goals to further their life, and they can switch that brain mechanism. And the 12-step program is pretty good at that.
Yes, it is.
For whatever reason, it's, it kind of does that. They have they start out with a short-term goal. One day, if it's not one day, 1 hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, you reduce it to the really ridiculous. But I think that's important that you do have those programs in your facility that way, because those, a lot of those people, especially if it's their first time there, they're thinking that's rock bottom for them. And if you have somebody there that can be like, hey, I know you fell, but this doesn't have to be the end.
And it's a complex, drug is a complex issue, because it's not only about the drug itself. I mean, what kind of support structure do you have? Do you have relatives that can help? Do you have parents that can help? Do you have money?
Right.
I mean, when you get out of jail, how are you going to afford to live? Who are you going to live with? There are so many things that come with this. I mean, law enforcement in Logan County is doing the best that we can. We are getting our rest. We're going out to the drug dealers. We're working with our prosecutor, working for a drug task force, working with the DEA on big cases. But it takes a lot more than what we do, because I mean it's the getting over drugs. You got to have a support structure in your life, and you can't go back to hanging out with the same friends. You can't, because the pressure's there.
Exactly.
And that's the hard part about this is, law enforcement is not to solve all the problems. We do our job, but we're not here to, we can't solve the drug problem in America. We
right.
can't. It goes way beyond what law enforcement, to enforce laws. So yeah, with our jail, we do have programs with our jail, but it's going to take a more societal effort to do this. Mm-hmm. But the big thing is it takes money.
Oh yeah.
And, rehab programs, especially inpatient, cost a lot of money. Then you have the whole mentally ill aspect, which is an issue that's totally separate. I mean, you're talking about a bed in a state hospital. You wonder how much one of those costs per bed when they're 24-hour, they got to have 24-hour care and watching all that kind of stuff. And there's nowhere near as much mentally ill support as we can get. Mm-hmm. Luckily, though, stuff like that is getting attention to the state legislators. There's, so crime and law enforcement has been up front. We have the school safety issues that has brought law enforcement to light. And so I think I think we're better now where we used to be, but there's just so much more to it. And that leads to an issue that's there, but it kind of comes up with this when it does come to arrest. I agree with you when you talked at the very front that we have to look for what's positive in our county. Mm-hmm. The city of Paris had hired a company. It was a first impressions company, and their job is to come in and they go to cities or governments, however, whatever hires them, and they look at what is people's impressions of that city or that area. And one of the things that they did is, they'll get on Facebook and look, they'll go to the police department, the sheriff's office page, and I also, and it's funny because I also had a citizen who moved here. She told me the same thing. She goes, man, I get on y'all's pages. There sure is a lot of arrests around here. That's good and all, but at the same time, is that what's going on here? Is a bunch of arrests. And so, we mulled that over. I remember reading that study. And so that's why when you look at our Facebook page, we try to mix both. We try to do things that are positive and show what's positive going on. I like to do a lot of scenery shots because I believe magazine is so beautiful. There's just something about that mountain that's, to me, that's just more than what just a pile of rock. It's a very beautiful, symbolic.
Boy Dan said something that I stole from him years ago, and he said that whenever I lose sight of Mount Magazine, I started getting vertigo. So that it's just majestic. I wouldn't say that because that's Colorado, and I don't live there, but it's beautiful. I agree with you. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Well, no, that's no problem. Sheriff Hicks was before I was in there, and he's a very good guy, and one who really, he's another person too that was just real big about the natural beauty of Logan County and how it's an asset to everyone. But so we started doing more stuff and talking about things like Shop with a Cop, and we'll go jump in the water for Special Olympics, the polar plunge, and we like to do, because there is a lot of positive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Our law enforcement officers, we have really teamed up this past couple of years on doing Shop with a Cop. I'm talking all across the county, raising money, wanting to get kids Christmas presents and stuff, and it's been a lot of fun. A haunted hayride that we had, it was put on by the Logan County Deputy Sheriff Association, which is our deputies getting together to do stuff. I mean, we had the Magazine Fire Department, Driggs Fire Department. We had EMTs. We had people just from family members, even former employees and their families that went out there and volunteered their time on the hayride to raise money for the Shop with a Cop program.
That's awesome.
That's the kind of stuff we're seeing. We're law enforcement not just doing that. I've seen, getting pictures with kids. I've seen the Paris police officers getting pictures with kids and doing stuff. We did a Screams on the Square in Paris, and the sheriff's office and Paris PD were out there and handing kids. You see, I'm telling you, the Chief Villarreal is very good at, he's not just a police chief, but he is a part of Boonville.
Right. And
he's very, very good about our profession and bringing our profession to, to the community and to the kids and stuff, and really, portraying us in a positive light, And so, we're doing the best we can. We've got school resource officers in a lot of the schools, and, they're working with the kids and stuff. So I really feel positive about the law enforcement in Logan County.
That's of all the problems that we have, that's one that we don't have. Even the city of Boonville, I don't think there's been a time where we've had a better team on the city police force. I don't think there's been a time where the county force was as good as it is now. I grew up here. I remember the 90s. People, you watch the news and people say, "Oh, I'm so scared to go out," or "It's terrible there." In the 90s, when the meth was so bad here, there were some places you didn't want to go. Some back roads you would get out and find yourself in trouble. But it doesn't seem to be like that anymore. We know that, and it's not all about, like you said, like the arrests and things. It's the department and the law enforcement is more involved in the community. Shop with a Cop and things like that. I think those are great programs.
Yeah, I was very blessed to follow a great sheriff. And I can't thank Boyd enough, because him and Ray Jake, who was a former sheriff in the 90s, and believe me, I've spent many a times with Ray talking to him about the meth problem, the meth labs and stuff they are finding everywhere. But those two working together, getting us a new county jail. And our county jail, actually, the vote for the tax was higher than any of them around here, because the citizens saw the need for that. And that was something that both former Sheriff Hicks and Ray had really put together. So, we've got good foundations to fall upon. We've got older law enforcement officers here that are very willing to be mentors and help our newer guys out. But law enforcement is turning into a younger person's profession, and that's the hard thing about it. We struggle sometimes to find candidates. Our jail is always hiring. We get people in there and they don't want to work nights and weekends. They don't want to work holidays. And believe me, as a father of 5, it's very understandable. Mm-hmm. And so, a lot of the deputies that are joining are getting younger, and so it's changing. Law enforcement's changing. I don't think it's changing for the better, because we're expected to do more than we've done in the past. But the amount of spotlight that's on us, the amount of people wanting to, denigrate our profession, to blame us for things. And these guys and ladies that work for us, they feel that at home, you know, when they see what happens to a lot of law enforcement officers, the danger. You know, we were talking about fentanyl. I saw a video of a deputy in California, and him and his partner, they both have body cameras on, and he was going through a vehicle and just got a whiff of fentanyl. And I mean, you watched him on his partner's body. His back went straight, and the man just fell over and unconscious. And luckily his partner has some Narcan. They had to give this guy a bunch of Narcan, both there and that was just for a small, very small, very, very tiny bit of fentanyl.
That's scary.
And so, you know, you have wives, you have husbands that are looking at this, and they're looking at their, you know, their spouse, their son, or their daughter, or whatever, and saying, "Do you really want to get in that?" You know, so that's where we're getting to these days. But luckily, you know, especially in small town, we've got a lot of folks that belong to our law enforcement agencies who want to make a difference here. Right. And so I'm glad that we have who we have.
That's one thing I've noticed about our area is we have a lot of community-minded volunteers and people who want to be a part of something bigger than themselves to make this a better place. And you don't see that a lot in other places, especially of our size. Yeah,
and we need them. We've got a couple of reserve deputies that are volunteer. We've got part-time deputies, and we need more. We need. You know, I'm really looking for folks that are kind of retired that want to serve as court bailiffs. That's where we're getting a shortage on court bailiffs, and they're part-time. The guys that we have, you know, a lot of them are retired, and it's just something they want to do and serve. They don't get to pay a lot of money for it because we don't pay good by the hour. But they do it because they serve and they enjoy serving and enjoy being part of a process, because it is bigger than them when they're part of that. And, you know, we do a lot of good stuff too with our guys. You know, we have several different, you know, we go to the range several times a year, and not just to qualify, but we'll have shoots, you know, like combat, you know, so we do a lot of things that kind of help train people.
Team building exercises, all that.
Yeah, we do. And so that's something, you know, most law enforcement agencies do one shoot a year. They shoot for qualifications, which is a 50-round statewide mandated course you got to do yearly. But we upped it, and we're doing 3. We do 2 that are combat related. One of our local guy here in Boonville, Mark Walker, really good dude. He's you know, he spent, over 20 years in the Air Force, but he's one of our patrol sergeants. He just went to a hand defensive tactics school, and he got to be an instructor. So now we have an on-site instructor who's able to teach both our jail staff and our deputies on hand-to-hand. So we're going to start having yearly in-service on that. And so we do a lot of our own classes too that we teach, you know, especially me, you know, I'm on the kind of legal side of things, but we got other guys, our investigators. You know, Al Brown, who is a police chief here for 10 years, one of our investigators. So we've got a lot of folks on staff, and our lead investigator is Keith Lunsford, but he's been a law enforcement officer for 20 years. We've got a really good investigative staff. And then you've interviewed our chief deputy in magazines, probably most biggest cheerleader that I know of, Joshua Scott. And so we've got crew, you know, they're just really dedicated to making everybody better. Our investigators, they love to work with the Paris and the Boonville police departments, and that way we're all doing stuff together. You know, right. Search warrants, we all got our roles because we want to do things right. I mean, we do a search warrant, we don't just go in there and start looking for things and get out of there, man. I mean, we send a guy in there to photograph first, everything the way it is. Then we have another person who gets the log out. When we find something, we get a number, we go photo. I mean, we have, you know, we've always tried to standardize things and make things so we cover every basis.
Systematic. That's good.
And that's how I am. I'm almost, you know, I guess I could say I like to do things the right way, right, in the right order. You know, I wouldn't call it obsessive compulsive, but I'm there. And so that's one of the things I like to do is have protocols.
That's funny. I've met you in passing a few times, and my wife said, "Well, what is he like?" I'm like, "Well, I really don't know him, but I can tell he's a very systematic person." And because, you know, it shows in the results of what you do, you know, and if somebody's lackadaisical and they're, you know, kind of seat of their pants, that's kind of the result you get, but that's obviously not what you're doing.
Yeah, it's about case. I mean, one of the things is about case files. I mean, if you have a case, you need to present the best case file you can to the prosecutor's office and make decisions. So that's one of the things why we want to go through everything. We got, even for I mean, for our dispatchers, our deputies, and our jail staff, we call them rook books. We got books that they got to check things off, so we know they're getting trained and everything. So yeah, we try to stay on top of things.
That's one of the questions I was going to bring up was what kind of technology do you have access to I don't want to give away any secrets or anything, but like, do you guys have the drone capabilities of where you can, instead of staking out like in a van across the street like you used to see on TV, you have like drones that can actually go over and stake out a place?
We try to stay up on technology. I mean, one of the things, and Sheriff Hicks in there, he bought body cameras, and then so we had them, and then when I took over, I got a couple grants and I upgraded our body cameras. All of our deputies have body cameras. All of our deputies, they have all the equipment they need, tasers, all that kind of stuff. We make sure vehicles, we've got good vehicles. We just did a grant for having computers in cars. I don't know if we'll get it or not, but that's something we're looking at where they can do stuff from the cars instead of, having to call dispatch and stuff. They can do reports, so they can cut down office time, things like that. Mm-hmm. But so we do try to our dispatch. We've used money in dispatch to upgrade our dispatch and upgrade our equipment there to get better. The better equipment. And so our jail's a very, very good place when it comes to technology. One of the things that we are trying is drones is an interesting concept because it's definitely moving as something a part of law enforcement. So we had some drug seizure money that we got on that case I was talking about several years ago. And I bought 2 drones through that program, so that's drug seizure money. And me and Albert Brown, who's, like I said, he's from here in Boonville, we both took the drone test. The drone pilot test was, I'll tell you, it was very hard. I mean, we're learning about like airport charts and all this kind of stuff. It was a pain. I'm telling you, we were really worried about it.
So it's not like playing Halo.
It is not. I'm telling you, the drone part 107 exam was a very, I didn't go, I'm a licensed attorney. I've taken the bar exam, which was the hardest test I'll ever take in my whole life. But I'm telling you, that drone test was a pain. But it was a good test, and it really updates you on the law, what you could do. And so we've got one drone. It's a regular drone. It's a really good drone. It's a DJI Mavic Air 2, really good drone. And the second drone is the Enterprise Advanced, which just actually has a thermal camera on it. And so it has both, has a visible camera and a thermal camera. And we're just learning right now, we're just focused on flying the things. Next month, we're going to go to a class at North Little Rock Police Department who has a drone program, has had one for years, so we can start looking at developing policy because we want to do everything right. I mean, right. I don't want to, invade people's space or that with the drones, but they have such a huge capability. The first thing I think about is like drug cases. I mean, have them surveillance, have them fly over house and looking for doors and windows and getting the good layout of the house. And then if we do execute a search warrant, having it there in case someone runs or, there's a lot of things you can do on it with the thermal camera. I mean, we live in a rural area and, if we get a hunter that gets lost or someone that gets out in the wood lost, something like that can help find people. Definitely. And that's what was on the big forefront of my mind on that thermal camera was, okay, we get someone that, a kid that runs off or a kid that gets lost or a hiker or, a hunter or whatever. Maybe we can use something like that to find them. Mm-hmm. And so we put that in place. I'm big on technology, but it is expensive. But, there's grants and there's money that you can find out there to update things.
Sure. What does success look like to you?
Man, success to me, I want our community to feel comfortable where they at. I mean, the reason why we form communities was safety. I mean, that going back to that's one thing about government. Government needs to understand that the reason why we form governments, we form communities was at first safe. Because if you don't feel safe, then you can't do much in life. It's very hard. That's why I hate to hear about Ukraine and South Sudan and all these. You start reading about these places, mm-hmm. Israel, and you wonder how it is to live in a place like that. So, the number one thing I want is I want people to live here, who come here, who visit, Reed's Barbecue and Black Dog and, our local restaurants and the Lodge on the Mountain or the Magazine Cafe or, MJ, wherever they to anywhere you visit that you feel safe here, that you want to come here, live, or at least you want to come here and spend your tax dollars and come to our. So we want people to feel safe, and success for me is just is people feeling like that Logan County is a great place to live. I like to see it when I walk in and see our deputies and our police officers, them working together, them smiling. I like to see them in, equipment when they're driving around. They don't have to fear their vehicle breaking down while they're, running 80 miles an hour on a hot call. And so I like it when I go to Walmart or go to places and people come up to and say, hey man, you guys did a good job. Mm-hmm. You guys got good folks working for you. Or even when, hey, you had a deputy come over there and he said the wrong thing or he did this wrong, but we got it worked out and everyone's the better for it. Cause I'm telling you, we all make mistakes. I mean, golly, I can list the many mistakes I've made in my life, but that's my main thing. I want this to be a county that people want to live in and they feel safe in.
That brings me to another question. What accomplishments are you most proud of?
Well, all across the board, there are so many. I think that one of the big accomplishments I think of is just where I'm at in life. I've got an awesome wife, Heidi. We've been married for 20 years. And, what we do is, we work together on all of our, on stuff, coming Logan County, raising our kids, it's all something we both talk about. We have 5 kids. One just graduated. She's going to Arkansas Tech right now. We got 2 boys under them. Then we have our twin girls who are 12. And to me, it's just, watching them grow up here, watching them interact here, being part of the community. That's where I see it. I just got out of church today and, we got a First Baptist here in Boonville. Great church, great people. And, they try to act. That's one thing I like about our church. We try to take what we do in church and go beyond. And that to me reflects on who I am and it comes to success. But at the sheriff's office, I'm glad where we're at right now. I can't be more happy to see where law enforcement is at right now. And it's a hard thing. I mean, it's a hard thing to cooperate. It's a hard thing in a county like this when you arrest people and you know them, their family, and it's hard. And you also get closer to see a lot of the bad stuff that happens. But for me, it's seeing where we're at. It's just a great place to be at.
Who is a mentor or hero that has inspired you the most?
Man, I've had several. That's the that's the issue. I've got a mother, that she was a military housewife and she went to college and got a degree and got into working at the computer room at the Arkansas Federal Credit Union, learned networking, and the next thing you know is making 6 figures and is a manager and stuff and to see that's a big deal. I've got a dad that's the Air Force 24 years and worked as a contractor for the Air Force for another 20 years, and has worked hard all his life. And in law enforcement, I've had a bunch. Boyd has been a very big influence on me on how I run our agency. Ray Jake has been a big influence on me because I worked under him for so long. But I've got there's just a lot of people in my life that I can look forward to, or, sometimes it's nice to sit on a front porch on a slightly cool evening and think about the different people who's made influence on your life. And I can thankfully say I've got a lot that has made an influence on my life. That's taught me things, through Mike Rainwater. When I worked under him, he's an attorney. I know you probably see him on television a lot in his commercials, but he was a very, taught me how to do a lot of things. I'm not obsessive compulsive compared to him. And so he taught me a lot of how to organize things, organize files, organize information. And that's what we try to do at the sheriff's. We want to get things organized so we don't miss stuff.
Right.
Because I take like stuff he did, and Boyd started some of this too with doing, we have deputy meetings, then we have executive meetings. And so, our supervisors meet weekly and we take notes. So at the next meeting, I can say, hey, did you guys do this? Did you do this? I wrote down, and then of course, then I see some things I should have done, that I got to make note of. So that's where a lot of what I get, like the people that help me is helping how we organize and do things at the sheriff's office.
What advice would you give a young person who aspires to pursue a career in law enforcement?
I think that, one of the number one things we look for in people is how do you relate to other people? How can you talk to other people? How do you have common? I mean, a lot of law enforcement is common sense because there's the letter of the law and then there's justice. And a lot of times they are not the same thing.
Right.
And you can't be a letter of the law person and be a true law enforcement officer. You've got to make discretion. You've got to be able to look at things and apply things. You've got to be able to talk to people. I don't like people who jump to conclusions. We teach over and over again, you need to talk to both sides every time, because that first side usually grips you.
Right.
And then when you talk to the person, you've already got a preconceived notion in your mind. You got a prejudicial thought in your mind because you talk. And so we focus so much about talking to both sides of both people. You know, when having a good, clean background, having good references. I know Boonville and Paris are the same thing as we are. We like to hire local people. You know, we want to hire people who are from here. And so, you know, just as you're a young person, you want to get in law enforcement. A lot of it is just living that good life and meeting people and be able to talk to people and have people who can say, yeah, I know Billy Joe. That's a good kid, man. He gets along with people. You know, he's tough, but he likes to get in that. So, you know, being in a small rural community, we don't have to worry too much. You know, you can't tell, hey, you go with your college degree to do this or do that. You know, we don't expect that where we're at. We just expect people to have a good work ethic and have good background. It doesn't matter what you do in a job, but just do a good job. Have a good reputation for doing a good job. If you're going to go work at Taco Bell, work there for a while, but have a good background in what you do and have a good story with what you do, because we're going to do background checks. We know on people. So if you're young, man, and you get out of school and you got to wait till 21 to be a law enforcement. Of course, the jail, you can go there at 18, but we just look for people who has a good work history. There's a trustworthy work history that we can check on to find out if this person really wants to get with this and stick with this. You got to have some broad shoulders of being law enforcement, because you're going to have people yell at you. You're going to have people talk bad about you. You're going to have, and that's another thing that people understand. Like when I go to Walmart, you know, a lot of people just go to Walmart and they buy what they have, but I go to Walmart and I see this person and I'm like, man, that guy was just in our jail. Do I need to, and I'm with my kids, you know, you're always thinking about the bad parts, and you're driving around and you see a car and like, oh, I know who that is. And man, we just got them last week for drugs. So that's what they're doing right now. So a lot of folks that get out of law enforcement, that's what they tell us, man, we're relieved. Because, man, when we go do places, we don't have to think about what you guys have to think about. So if you're young and you're wanting to get in this, you need to be prepared that if you're in law enforcement in a small area like Logan County, it's going to affect you personally. It's going to affect your family. It's going to affect your friends. And you got to be ready for that. You got to be ready for it.
Yeah, it's the difference between being a shepherd and a sheep. Shepherd has to watch all the sheep, and the sheep only has to worry about itself.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, and I think about it a lot because, you know, one of the professions I see is like being a pastor. To me, that is the hardest job, because you've got so much stuff you have to. It's not about getting up and preaching. You know, it's about so much more on doing things wrong versus right, and being held to a standard even though you don't want to be held to. And you know, today Pastor Stu was, you know, he was just talking about how, you know, people sometimes ask him to pray. But he's like, you know, you don't need to ask me to pray for you, because that's the great thing about how God is, you know, you do it, and it has just as much power with you doing it than if I as a preacher. So law enforcement kind of gets like that a little bit, you know, the expectations that we have, the problems we're expected to fix and that kind of stuff. It weighs on you as a person. And a lot of people don't think about us as a person. They think about us as a soldier.
Right.
And we're not soldiers in that aspect, and that we all have kids and families. We all have bad days and good days, and days when someone's sick and your mind is not 100% there. And so as Josh, our chief deputy, keeps telling you, you got to get your mind right at the beginning of the day,
right,
to go in and do what you have to do for a living. And it's hard.
You said something a minute ago that really hit home. You said that you can't be an effective law enforcement officer if you follow the letter of the law, because law and justice are two different things. You know who Trey Gowdy is? You ever heard of Trey Gowdy? Yes. He used to say all the time that justice is a blind lady holding a set of scales. I think it's, you know, what you said is important, because if we did follow the letter of the law, just like the Bible, no one would, especially in today's society, there's no way you could live your life without breaking the law, whether it be speeding or we don't have inspections now, but people with, inspections on their vehicles, there's no way we can't. So that's, shows how important it is in law enforcement that you have that discretion to say, hey, what's the intent here? What is this person doing?
Yep. And another aspect of that is how you work with your prosecutor's office. And so, and when I take when I say letter of law and then justice, you want to prepare cases the best that you can. You want to get every aspect. You want to talk to people. So when you do give it to the because ultimately what people don't understand, the head law enforcement officer in this county is not me. I love to say that I am, but the prosecuting attorney who you elect as a prosecuting attorney, he's the one that makes the decision on what cases to file.
Mm-hmm.
You want to give them the best you can give them on a case and for them to understand every aspect of a case, because it is more than just what the black words on a white page of our statute. It's different than that because there's so many little factors that go into why people do things. And so we always seek to provide the best case file we can to them so they can make the best informed decision on whether to file charges or not. Because that is the difference between justice and the letter of law, is what actually happened and what society thinks, because society's the one that writes the laws and where we're at on that. And so, we do see that in jury trials. That's why it's important to have jury trials.
Right.
Even though I know jury duty can be hard sometimes, but that is a good aspect of the citizens to see the difference between what the law is, but then how to take the law and apply it to all the facts. That's what law school is all about. 3 years of law school was basically us reading cases and finding out what the rule that they did. And then that law professor, they'll ask you, say, Mr. Massey, stand up. So you went over this case. Did you read it last night? Yes, I did. What's the rule of the law? What did the judges rule? And then I give him the rule. Then he says, but what if the fact situation was this? And then you start thinking. And then they said, then what if the fact situation was this? So they're teaching you over the years to take a rule, but look at every different thing that can apply to that rule that can be different than what it's stated. And because we're so different, God made humanity so different. And so that's what we try to do, in law enforcement, is we try to get the whole broad picture and let our prosecutor decide on what to do with that.
Awesome. Well, I want to be mindful of your time here. So I told you 45 minutes, but we're well over an hour now. But I do appreciate you so much for coming on. Is there anything that you would like to touch before we close?
Well, I would just, I'd like to say thank you to our law enforcement officers in this county and abroad. We have a hard job, and we have to be vigilant. We have to, to look at people, read people, and I say thank you to all you guys and ladies and who serve and protect and we just ask the public to be patient with us and to help us out and know that, that we're here to work with y'all.
Very good. And how can people get involved if, let's say, they're volunteer minded and they wanted to help out somehow? Is there an avenue to do that? Yeah,
there's different avenues. We do have some programs like reserve deputy and stuff that people, there's a lot that goes with it, because to be a certified officer, whether you're a reserve deputy or part-time, it takes a lot of training.
Sure.
It's like an 80-hour online courses through the state law enforcement commission. Then you got to do 30 hours of practical. So there's a lot to do in that. But, I think that one thing to just help out is just, when you see law enforcement, talk to them, congratulate them, say, hey, we're behind you. Share information with us. If you see things that are out of the ordinary, let us know. We're listening. And, I think that's probably the best way that people can help, is just being supportive and understanding where we're at.
To reach out to you guys, you're on Facebook. I know you have the website you can anonymously report something through the website. And of course there's always the telephone.
And public. We try to be public a lot. Like yesterday, we had Drug Take Back Day, which is where we set up a booth with Boonville PD at the Walmart in Boonville, and Chief Villarreal was there with Al Brown, and then I was up in Paris we had a Paris officer there and a couple of our folks there, and it's funny, we had more people come by asked us questions than actually come gave us the prescription drugs that we were going to go get rid of. That's the reason why Drug Take Back Day was to get unused, especially opioids, off the street and get them disposed of in a safe manner. But we had people just stop by to ask us. I mean, I was at October Days. I try to go to these different events, and a lot of it's just people come to us and, hey man, if I got a neighbor that's doing this, is that legal? Or what do you think about this issue or stuff like that? So, we do try to get out there to answer questions and stuff. And I get messages on Facebook. I get messages on my phone at work. I get people calling my cell phone. I get all kinds of stuff. And I try to respond to everybody.
So what do you do in your free time when you're not?
Well, my wife and I, like I said, we've got 5 kids. So we a lot of what we do with our kids, I got one that likes fishing. So we go out and fish. We go to a ton of events. I mean, basketball games. They're in the junior high school stage now. So, we're going to basketball games, football games. A lot of it's kids, I like getting outdoors. I like taking care of my lawn for some reason. I know our pastor was talking about today, like how he likes to get out there and mow. There is something good about, getting your yard and your lawn done and being able to sit back and say, hey, there's a tangible result right in front of you. Right. Play video games with my kids. We've gone hiking. We visit relatives, and that's on my free time. But, I don't have a lot of it. But I spend a lot of time in gyms and football fields and things like that. But man, it's a lot of fun. I like watching our kids, just do good and work. And, the sports atmosphere around here is crazy. And our kids are also involved in the FFA, which is Future Farmers of America. They're chapters of the school. So we've been to a lot of county fairs and state fair and, with animals and stuff. So, again, one of the great things about living a rural life. Yep. A lot of stuff to do in Logan County. Come down here. We got ATV riding here. We've got horseback riding. Heck, you want to hang glide off Mount Magazine. We got great restaurants. I mean, it's just a beautiful county and a lot of stuff to give you if you want to come over here and take part.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on.
You're welcome. I appreciate it.